Hi guys, welcome to the second episode of the Society Against Material Pursuits podcast. I'm your host, Angel Karchev, and believe it or not, I personally don't. I have a guest today who is less of a guest and more of my friend. His name is Dennis. Dennis, say hello in whatever language is most
Right.
comfortable to you. Okay, it's English. Uh, so I take it you listened to last week's podcast and was so thrilled with the content that you decided to join me today.
Well, it was rather scrumptious. The amount of information that was figured in one podcast and the informative side of every single subject covered in it was so vivid, and it's an experience I want to be I want to be a part in.
Part of, but
Part of.
otherwise a very, very
Yes.
good
Yes.
British impression, my friend. Um, so Dennis was actually name checked in last time's podcast. He is the president of the Smarks Movie Club, which I am a participant in, and it's the premier movie club in ACS. Just letting you
It
know.
is the only legitimate movie club.
Just like the Joker
Yes.
is the first movie,
Yes, I literally just denounced the legitimacy of every other club.
which doesn't exist basically. Clubs are a
Yes,
figment of your
because there are no
imagination.
other clubs. I
Yeah,
denounce their existence.
sure. So, Dennis is fitting in pretty nicely so far in the philosophy podcast. Uh, so, let's start with a question. The customary question, Dennis. What was the last song you listened to?
Uh, it was. Oh, wait, I want to check this to be absolutely certain on my answer. It's Arctic Monkeys. Why do you always call me when you're high?
Okay, a classic for for a lot of
For the
people.
Society podcast.
For the Society podcast, Arctic Monkeys, a staple. Uh, how did you listen to this? Like where and for what reason?
I listened to it in Spotify because I felt like it. It's very. I find it very comforting to go to sleep listening to this type of music.
Rock music. You find it comforting to go to sleep with rock music.
Absolutely.
I actually knew a guy. He was a year. He still is probably a year older than me, and we only really talked during a camp I went to in seventh grade. The guy just listened to everything, and the strangest thing he listened to, like when he fell asleep, he put on like Slipknot, which are this really really heavy metal new metal group. I
Yeah, I
like
know.
them. Yeah,
Yeah, I
I'm
know
just
them.
explaining
They're pretty cool.
to people. Yeah, I like them, but I just can't imagine somebody falling asleep to that. But it's pretty cool. So Arctic Monkeys, eh? They're indie staple, and especially this song is one of their lesser known hits, right?
Yeah, but
Totally.
pretty
Nobody knows.
underrated.
Underrated. So the last song I listened to, it's called "If You Really Love Nothing" by Interpol. Interpol are one of my favorite bands. They're from New York. Post punk, really cool. I really like them. I really like their lyrics. It's pretty cool. They're pretty good. The song in question is from their latest album, which is 2018. Released to pretty negative reviews, to be honest. And the song itself comes nothing close to the classics of the first albums. Huey Lewis and the News. Uh, feels like they really come into their own with the release of Sports. Quick movie reference here. But no, really, this song is great. Um, but just the first album, Interpol, Turn on the Bright Lights, unmatchable. It's just really good. It helped me through tough times. The one tough time I've had in my life. Like, don't think my life is so hard. I just have nothing to live for. Otherwise, I'd probably be pretty happy. So, enough about music. Me and Dennis were actually discussing before the recording kicked off. We had some problems, and we used the downtime to talk about what we're going to talk about. So, Dennis, introduce your topic.
So my topic is how has the do or more like do you agree with the morality of the US interfering in the Middle East, and what do you think are the moral consequences of their actions?
Yeah. So this is moral consequences. You said moral consequences,
Yes,
right?
I prefer to look at it on the moral side.
All
Of course,
right.
we are well aware of most of the materialistic consequences, and of course, this is the society against materialist podcast. So
Pursuits.
you know,
Society against material pursuits. But
yes, yes,
it's a
of course,
podcast, yeah.
it's a podcast, and we don't like materialism. That's the
Yeah,
main point.
that's the main point. Although there was going to be a person here who is a self-proclaimed materialist, but he couldn't make it. Expect him next week, probably. Um, so I like the topic actually about the moral implications of U.S. imperialism in the Middle East. Obviously, a very heavy topic to talk about. Pretty, and considering like we're 17-year-old people in the Balkans, like how are we supposed to like we don't some people might say we don't have the credibility. Some people who I suppose most recently voted for a certain someone um in a recent election event. I wonder what I could be referring to. Um,
Also
so
recently got flipped in four massive states, namely Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin,
and
and
Georgia,
Arizona.
Georgia,
Oh yeah, and also Georgia. Yeah, five.
five, no cap. It's just five states. So obviously, both of us are uh, not supporters of the mysterious personage we're alluding to. Uh, and what we
Well,
mean to say.
I wouldn't all attribute it to the orange guy. I would mostly attribute it to a culture that began right after Eisenhower, probably. In that the I think Jimmy Carter was one of the first that went in the Middle East with wars. No, no, actually no. I think Lyndon B. Johnson was even before that involved in uh, creating conflict in the Middle East in his own pursuits. So
Maybe
this is a
something,
long
but yeah,
culture. Yeah, this
yeah,
is a very long culture. It didn't start with Donald Trump.
yeah. So basically, like we're the moral implications of U.S. imperialism in the Middle East are very like are less apparent than the obvious economic ruin and societal just chaos there. It's more like what impact it has on the people under attack and the attacking people. So obviously for American militarists, which are a surprising amount. Like at this point, I don't even try to comprehend America because while it is essentially like most colonial states, it is founded on multiculturalism. Like they are really combative in their identity, which doesn't it in itself need combativeness. So like a lot of people will defend something they not necessarily agree with just because they can identify just because it identifies with the same thing. Like a lot of people would defend imperial will defend say the invasion of Iraq and the Gulf War. A lot of people will defend that simply because it was done by America, while if it was done by other states, it would probably not be accepted so easily, right?
Mm, I kind of agree and disagree with you. I don't think many people look at it lightly just because it was done by Americans. I think possibly Americans think that it's done lightly because it's done by Americans, but there are a lot of implications of their influence on the Middle East. A lot of implications, mainly on the culture and the vast difference that it created in in the way that their society is built. They inserted a new rule of Taliban's and guerrilla militias that are so they have so much power over the government that the government has been weakened, of course, from U.S. forces, and of course the guerrilla forces now have more power than the government itself, which creates fear in people and hate. And hate leads to anger, and this anger leads to nothing productive and the dark side as well.
Obviously, the dark side. Yeah, interrupting our brief spiel on the atrocities committed by the Taliban to bring you a Star Wars reference.
Of course,
Disney, sponsored by Disney. Yeah. Anyways, I think you
sponsored by
bring up a
Letterbox.
I think you bring up a good point about the forcible insertion of cultures because uh this is something I've realized pretty recently is that mm, while other cultures have the potential to understand things the same as us, because for example, in Europe, most countries are in the multi-party system compared to America's very institutionalized two-party system, and the East Asia's models of government, which are foreign, uh, to like indescribable. So what I've learned recently is that you can't apply European thinking to say Asian concepts or American concepts. Like to understand America, which is built by white settlers and other people of color that were most likely slaves or other people. Like these people were there from the beginning. Bulgaria is like a 90 something percent white Bulgarian ethnically consolidated country. And so that's the case with most of the countries of Europe. So I think it's really hard to understand like the Asian perspective on things and the Asian culture, like Japanese and Chinese culture, for example. Like if you try to understand them with the European way of thinking, you're either going to fail or reach some very wrong conclusions. And I've recently learned to apply this to America as well, because you can't. There's a reason we call it the New World and the Old World, like, and we call America the land of opportunity because it's it is exactly that. Europe has always had countries and has always had people that were highly institutionalized and ready to fight for their rights and to fight for their land. But America and colonial nations were just very less defined, which led really specifically to more freedom and led to a different idea. Like it's America is built with a different idea in mind. We can't just say, well, why don't they just have healthcare like in Scotland or like in France? The ideas are different. The ideas behind everything is different. This is and the mistake here, to relate this back to the topic, the mistake here is that the American government in the past 70 years has not applied this principle to dealing with foreign governments, like the invasions of Afghanistan, the invasion of Iraq, the invasions of hell, even of other South American countries. It's all in an effort to enforce an American view of society, which, like, first of all, enforcing anything, while it could be effective in the short term, is really destructive in the long term. Uh, Second of all, these such drastic change breeds chaos on its own. So it's like chaos upon chaos upon chaos, which leads to this never-ending hole of, as you said, guerrilla warfare and the Taliban and the militias and people just live in fear. And in the end, you had maybe an imperfect system, and after it's been touched around and like put a fucking I swore, put a like a finger in it, just turn it around a few times, you have like a hellhole. You have a really really bad situation, which didn't need to be that way.
Well, what I want to say about this is, if you ever have the need or feel the need to interfere in another country, you should probably, in a perfect world, everyone should strive for the same ideals, the same socialized ideals, because, of course, we live in a society, and these principles need to be applied to every single principle. But of course, there's a lot of different coefficients that need to be taken account of when thinking about other sovereign nations, like whether they have enough money to be able to socially redistribute everything and still keep a fair amount within the state to be able to provide government mandated free healthcare, free school, and all these socialized ideas that help us live united. All of this should be accounted for, but it never is when we're talking about Americans. Americans go on their foreign pursuits mainly because they feel, for some reason, threatened. The excuse they used in the Iraqi wars, for example, was that they were searching for weapons of mass destruction that were never actually found. And the reasons they went into other foreign nations like Syria is that they were searching for Al Qaeda and other different stuff, when of course Al Qaeda was never a territorially defined institution or even an institution of its own. It was more of an idea that was followed by different radicalists around the world. And the fact that they tried to pin Al Qaeda to a single country or a single region within a country is, just from a foreigner's point of view, looking at it, it's actually stupid. It's the one of the worst foreign policy ideas I've ever heard, and of course, I'm attributing this to George Bush Jr., one of my favorite presidents. Of
Oh
course, I'm
yeah,
saying it sarcastically. Uh,
George W. Bush.
the only president that has ever had a shoe thrown in him, and also the only president that has had two shoes thrown at them in the same interview.
Well, you would think one follows the other, right? One shoe
Yes,
follows
yes,
the
of
other.
course. But you would think after a reporter throws a shoe at a president of a foreign country, you'd think some security guard would do something to stop him from throwing another shoe. No, no, no one does anything. He grabs his other shoe and throws it at the president. And then when he's out of shoes, they're like, "Okay, yeah, you're done here. Okay, go on."
Yeah. Uh, that's pretty aggressive rhetoric, but it is worth noting, recognizing, because only if we recognize the mistakes of the past can we work not to repeat them. Obviously, this is just the old proverb used to teach people, oh, this is why history is important, blah blah blah. In reality, history is pretty important for reasons other than, oh, it's fancy and it helps you not repeat the things, nah, 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 nah. And yeah, that's the type of
And
thing.
yeah,
I think George Bush, uh, George W. Bush, obviously the one in the 2000s, was uh, the last Republican president we can contrast with, and the only one we can actually compare, because the problems, the Republican president before him was his father. It's George Bush Senior, and he faced a lot of different problems that he than the governments of today face. Well, we can kind of compare George Bush Jr.'s problems he faced, because he also faced global terrorism, and in the beginning of his term, Donald Trump also faced terrorism. And as the last two Republican presidents, how do you think they compare in terms of public opinion and policy
I
decisions?
think I think it's very simple with these two. I think George W. Bush. Here's a funny statistic about him. He's historically looked upon. He's the most liked president at any point in time in history. At any point in time in history, he has received the biggest approval rating ever, with a whopping 82% of the American population approving of the American president. Now, this, of course, seems a lot of bogus. It doesn't seem right. It's absolutely untrue when you look at it on a global scale. The fact that he's incompetent, the fact that he's so it seems illiterate at some points, that in many times he he blunders his words so badly, or his actions, that there is a new word, the word that was created just for him. It's called Bushisms. So this president, for some reason, is the most approved in world history, and now I'm going to explain why. He was most approved in November of 2001. Now this is right after the 9/11 terrorist attack. It's 2 or 3 months afterwards. He was approved because he took very restrictive and xenophobic actions against everything. He tightened border control, he tightened airport control, he declared war on terrorism, which is one of the worst ideas taken in in the Oval Office as a whole. He declared war on terrorism, went in the Middle East, destroyed multiple just peaceful cities, and cities that didn't have any military base or any form of foreign terrorist force within them. And he just went on this rampant killing spree of destroying settlements around the Middle East. And this brought the American public happiness. It brought them fulfillment. They felt like they have been avenged, which is sad if you think about it. It's just depressing to see what the American public defines as good presidential orders. The murder of multiple civilians and women and children mainly, and attacks on cultural heritages that are not even residing near a military base or a foreign terrorist group, or any type of foreign militia for that matter. It just destroys culture and people. And this has been approved by so many Americans. The fact that fear rules over an American mind, the fact that you can just control most of America with only fear, is just so sad. And when comparing George W. Bush with Donald Trump, I want to say Donald Trump, he tried to control everyone with fear. He tried, but his approval rating never broke 50%. He's at this time the only president to never break 50% approval rating. Not even once, not from the day he was elected, when he was elected without the popular vote, to the day he left, when he left with around 37% of approval rating. It's just sad to see that people like this can get elected into office and control American minds for 4 or even 8 in George W. Bush's perspective years.
Uh, he he served one term. Oh no, he did. He did. It
No,
was two
no, no, no.
terms.
From
Oh my
2000 to
God, yeah.
2008. Yeah,
Oh
two
yeah.
terms.
Jesus Christ. Okay.
Yep,
Uh,
fear. That's what fear does.
I couldn't believe that because I know he had his critics after 9/11 and the whole war on terror thing.
No,
Um,
no. Actually, immediately afterwards,
no,
he.
not immediately
Well,
afterwards.
of
I mean,
course, in the long
like
term, they
yeah,
people realized it was one of the most stupid decisions created by a U.S. president.
yeah. So I think in retrospect, I think we'll look upon Donald Trump and even George Bush to a lesser extent, though, as probably some of the worst U.S. presidents. I think, of course, there are some from the Civil War era that are obviously worse because that was an internal American threat. I mean, I know about this, like Franklin Pierce and Andrew Garfield, who's oh no, was his name Andrew? Or is this the actor I'm thinking of? The guy who was Lincoln's vice president was so incapable that he was actually, I think he was the only impeached president successfully in American history because
No,
after Lincoln.
Garfield was the one that got assassinated.
Oh, who am I thinking of? Andrew Jackson. I'm thinking of Andrew Jackson, I think. Oh, I have to look this up. Uh, one
And
moment.
it's James Garfield, not Andrew Garfield. Andrew Garfield is
He's the actor.
movie
I knew
star
it.
from Spider-Man.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I mixed it up. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. And Andrew Jackson is the bad president who everybody likes because he was he actually reduced public debt for a long time. Andrew Johnson is his name. I could never remember his name. Um so yeah. Basically, um that's the deal. Like I'd say that really Donald Trump and George Bush are probably among the worst American presidents ever. Like if you think about the last president before the Second World War that dealt in the Middle East, that was Woodrow Wilson in the First World War. And actually, if you look at Wilson's 14 points, which are mm, which are about the First World War, and it was about how basically 14 points of how to establish countries in the post-war scenario, which is like it says, conduct a referendum, ask them about a point of a system of governing, etc., etc. You'd see that like there have been presidents who have handled such colonialistic, I'd say imperialistic crises much better than what we saw in the latter part of the 20th century. Because in the during the Cold War, uh, America was ready to finance everybody would that didn't like socialism. Like if we go to Chile, we see Augusto Pinochet,
Talking
who
about McCarthyism, right?
yeah, we're just talking about how America gave money to fascists just because they didn't like the quote unquote communists. Like
Communists, yeah, they didn't like them.
Augusto Pinochet, I think in Chile. Yeah, it's definitely in Chile. He threw communists off helicopters into the Pacific Ocean, and America financed him because they thought that maybe socialism wouldn't be good. Of course, I'm not defending Soviet style Bolshevism because I think any totalitarian system is just wrong. It's just wrong. It's just very wrong. But in conclusion, to wrap this up, I think it's just the once the ideas of colonialism and imperialism uh, in general, and specifically of the United States from the Cold War onwards, have really been the main driving forces of what the modern world's problems are if we ignore the pandemic and stuff. Like we will see the biggest problem before the pandemic in the world, I think you'd agree with this, was terrorist attacks and the instability in the Middle East, right? Like before the pandemic, you'd say this is the biggest problem.
I'd say that's pretty fair to
Yeah,
say that.
so and so when you go back farther and farther and see what actually caused this problem, and you just see a paper trail of American financing, like the Taliban Afghanistan war, which sure was against the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union invaded a sovereign country, but the United States financed possibly the worst people it could finance. It's just crazy how just off the mark they were with most of the things they did.
I think
I think
they're just
yeah,
funnily
yeah,
enough, the people with the best economy in the world shouldn't be trusted with money. That's the conclusion I have received from all of this. It's just they finance all the wrong wars for all the wrong reasons. I guess they profit out of them from getting oil and natural resources like this, but just just stupid. It's wrong.
yeah. I think, yep, that's a cheerful end to our podcast once again. So this was a very political entry of the Society Against Material Pursuits podcast. We'll see you soon, maybe next week, maybe in 2 weeks. I don't know. Well, until then, my name was Angel Karchev. This
My
is
name was Dennis Tahir, and
right.
this was the
This was
Society Against
Against Material
Cultural.
Pursuits. Nope, you still don't know the name. All
Of
right,
course, I know it.
of course. Okay, see you soon. Bye.